Welcome to the Inspiring Tech Leaders podcast with me, Dave Roberts. Last week, I released a podcast all about the introduction of Fable 5, only to find out that on my way to the airport for a week-long business trip, that it had become the subject of a US government export ban. So, this has now been my first opportunity to return with an update on the situation. This story touches on national security, geopolitical competition, government intervention, AI regulation, the race between the United States and China, and perhaps most importantly, who ultimately controls the AI landscape. In today's episode, I'll explore what happened, why it matters, and what it tells us about the future of AI leadership. So let's begin. For much of the past 3 years, the AI conversation has focused on competition between technology companies. OpenAI versus Google, Anthropic versus OpenAI, Microsoft versus everyone else. But over the last few weeks, the narrative has changed dramatically. The competition is no longer between companies, it is increasingly between nations. Anthropic has become one of the most influential AI companies in the world. Founded by former OpenAI executives, the company built its reputation around AI safety, responsible development, and cautious deployment of increasingly capable systems. Its newest generation of models, Mythos 5 and Fable 5, represented a major leap forward in capability. According to Anthropic, these systems demonstrated significant improvements in software engineering, reasoning, vision capabilities, and complex knowledge work. They were viewed by many observers as amongst the most capable AI systems available anywhere in the world. Then everything changed. The United States government issued an export control directive targeting the models. The order restricted access by foreign nationals and effectively forced Anthropic to disable the systems globally. Rather than attempt to implement complex nationality-based controls immediately, the company chose the fastest path to compliance and shut the models down for everyone. Meaning one of the world's leading AI companies launched its most advanced technology and then had to pull it offline days later because of national security concerns raised by the government. This wasn't a software bug, it wasn't a cyber attack, it wasn't a commercial failure, it was geopolitics. According to Anthropic, the government's concerns centered around reports that Fable 5 could potentially be jailbroken and used to identify software vulnerabilities. Anthropic argued that the vulnerabilities demonstrated were relatively limited and that similar capabilities existed in other publicly available models. Nevertheless, the government acted. The speed of the government's intervention shocked many across the industry. Reports suggested that Anthropic only had a very short period to respond before more extensive restrictions could be imposed. What was especially interesting was that the company had reportedly participated in government testing and approval processes prior to deployment. For technology leaders, this raises an interesting question. What happens when AI becomes so strategically important that governments start treating models the same way as they treat military technology? Historically, export controls have focused on advanced semiconductors, cryptography, weapon systems, and sensitive scientific research. Now, AI models are also joining that list. That's a major shift. For many years, technology executives assumed that the software would remain fundamentally global. Build once, deploy everywhere. That assumption may no longer hold. The Anthropic case suggests that frontier AI models are beginning to be viewed as strategic national assets. If that sounds dramatic, consider the broader context. The United States and China are engaged in an increasingly intense race to dominate artificial intelligence. Both countries understand that AI will influence economic productivity, military capability, scientific research, cybersecurity, education, and healthcare. Whoever leads in AI gains advantages across almost every sector. This is why comments made recently by Elon Musk generated so much attention. Musk suggested that China could have a Fable 5 class AI model by the first quarter of next year. Yet even more interesting was the response from Ji Tang, the leader of a Chinese AI company often described as a rival to Anthropic. His response was essentially that Musk was being too conservative. China, he argued, may not need to wait that long. The gap between American frontier models and Chinese competitors is shrinking rapidly. Whether or not one agrees with that assessment, the strategic implications are enormous. For several years, Western observers assumed that the United States enjoyed a substantial lead in frontier AI. Today, that lead appears increasingly fragile. Chinese companies have accelerated their development efforts dramatically. Investments continue to flow into research, infrastructure, and talent. New models are emerging at a pace that would have seemed impossible only a few years ago. This creates a dilemma for policymakers. On one hand, governments want to protect national security. On the other hand, excessive restrictions may slow innovation and undermine competitiveness, and right now, Anthropic sits directly at the center of that tension. Initially, President Donald Trump appeared deeply concerned about Anthropic and the potential risks associated with its most advanced systems. In interviews, Trump suggested that he had viewed the company as a national security threat only a week earlier. That is an extraordinary statement when you consider that Anthropic is an American company headquartered in the United States. Yet remarkably, the situation evolved almost as quickly as it emerged. Following discussions between Anthropic's executives and administration officials, Trump's tone softened considerably. In a subsequent interview, he stated that he no longer viewed Anthropic as a national security threat and praised the company's response to government concerns. He had noted that Anthropic had acted quickly and responsibly in addressing the issue. This shift is significant for several reasons. First, it demonstrates that AI policy is still being formed in real time. Unlike mature industries with decades of established regulation, AI governance remains fluid and evolving. Second, it highlights the growing importance of executive engagement with government. Technology leaders can no longer be separated from public policy leadership. The CEOs of frontier AI companies increasingly need to operate not only as business leaders, but also as diplomats, policy negotiators, and national security stakeholders. That requires a completely different leadership skill. Many technology executives have spent their careers focusing on products, customers, innovation, and growth. Now they must also understand geopolitics, export controls, international relations, and regulatory strategy. The boardroom is expanding, and so is the CEO's job description. Another fascinating aspect of this story is what this reveals about perceptions of AI risk. Anthropic has long been known as one of the industry's strongest advocates for AI safety. The company frequently warns about the potential risks associated with increasingly capable systems. Supporters argue that reflects responsible leadership. Critics argue it can sometimes create an atmosphere of alarmism. Recent commentary has suggested that Anthropic's own emphasis on AI risk may have contributed to greater government scrutiny of its models. Whether that's true or not, it creates an interesting paradox. The companies warning most aggressively about AI risks may ultimately become the first companies subjected to significant government intervention. It's a reminder that narratives matter. The way organizations communicate about technology can influence how regulators, politicians, and the public respond. For leaders listening today, that's an important lesson. Communication is not separate from strategy. Communication is strategy. Now, let's talk about what happened next. After the shutdown, reports emerged suggesting that access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5 could potentially be restored relatively quickly. Anthropic indicated that the suspension was intended as a temporary measure while discussions with government officials continued. That possibility alone illustrates how rapidly circumstances are changing. One week a model is considered a national security concern, the next week discussions are underway regarding its return. This level of uncertainty creates challenges not only for AI companies, but also for customers. Imagine you're a large enterprise building strategic workflows around frontier AI. What happens if the model disappears overnight? What happens if government action changes availability? What happens if geopolitical developments alter access rights? These questions were largely theoretical a few years ago. They're now becoming practical concerns today. For technology leaders, resilience is becoming just as important as capability. Organizations may need to think more carefully about model diversification, vendor risk management, and contingency planning. The lesson is simple. The most powerful model is not necessarily the most dependable platform. Dependability now includes political and regulatory stability. That's a new dimension for enterprise technology strategy. Looking ahead, I believe we're witnessing the emergence of what could be described as an AI Cold War. Not a military conflict, not necessarily even an economic conflict, but a strategic competition centered around intelligence itself. For decades, nations competed over natural resources, manufacturing capability, and energy. Today, they're increasingly competing over computation, algorithms, talent, and data. The Anthropic story is a glimpse into that future, a future where AI models are treated as strategic assets, a future where governments intervene directly in model deployment, a future where technology companies become geopolitical actors, and a future where AI leadership requires navigating not only markets, but also national interests. The implications extend beyond the United States and China. Europe, the United Kingdom, India, Japan, and many other nations are all developing their own AI strategies. Everyone understands that falling behind could have significant consequences. The race is accelerating. Yet amid all this competition, one question remains unresolved. How should society balance innovation and security? Move too slowly and innovation suffers. Move too quickly and risks increase. Finding that balance is the next challenge for technology leaders to solve. As we conclude today's episode, I'd encourage you to think about the broader lesson behind the story. Technology leadership is changing. The leaders who thrive in the next decade won't simply understand technology. They'll understand policy, they'll understand regulation, they'll understand geopolitics, and they'll recognize that innovation increasingly happens at the intersection of all three. The shutdown of Fable 5 and Mythos 5 may eventually be remembered as a temporary disruption, or it may be remembered as the moment when governments around the world began treating advanced AI as a strategic national resource. Either way, it marks an important milestone in the evolution of artificial intelligence, and it reminds us that the future of AI will be shaped not only by engineers and entrepreneurs, but also by presidents, regulators, and nations. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Inspiring Tech Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. You can find more insights, show notes, and resources at www.inspiringtechleaders.com. Head over to the social media channels. You can find Inspiring Tech Leaders on X, Instagram, Inspo, and TikTok. And let me know your thoughts on the recent Fable 5 developments. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in tech.